Hey, welcome back to the shop, everybody. So I don't know if this happens to you or not, but this seems to happen to me quite often. When I try to roll up a 100-foot lead cord, I end up getting tangled into this thing and end up rolling around on the ground. Well, this time is the last time, because the neighbor caught me, and he thought that there was a baby gorilla rolling around in my backyard, and he called the zookeepers on me. There's got to be an easier way. There is an easier way. A drill-powered lead cord roller. Want to see how I made it? Stick with me, and let's get started. Alright, we're back out here in the shop, and we are cutting the holes and the spoke holes in the first wheel, 3/4 inch plywood, and the programming came out perfect. Using my old Craftsman bandsaw to cut the tabs off. Look, it's a wheel, Ma. And we checked the 1-inch dowel fits perfectly. We got a wheel. Now here, you see that little tab on the end of that tape? That's something I wanted to show y'all. Leave little tabs on the end of your blue tape when you're doing the CA glue trick, and you can see how easy it is to peel these off, even with no fingernails. Now we got ourselves a wagon wheel, a cart going through. I rounded off the corners on both sides of the wheel, because I can picture getting a nasty sliver in your hand while that thing is spinning if you happen to reach up and grab it. So we smooth these off. Make pretty. Now that block on the left-hand side there that looks kind of like a horseshoe, that's so you don't have to immediately shut off your router when you set it down. Sanding off the pencil marks. I realize this is just plywood, but we still want to make it look kind of pretty. And speaking of pretty, we're going to use some unnecessary black walnut for spokes. Now I know the internet loves it some black walnut, so I figure if I put some black walnut on here, this thing will automatically, immediately become an Art Deco piece. It'll be a work of art with that black walnut spokes. Of course, when the wire's on there, you'll never see the spokes, but you and I both know it's there. The tape is holding several pieces together so that we cut them so that they are cut exactly the same. And of course we get them stuck on the fingers constantly doing this. And here we go. Let's see if they fit and if they line up. Which I'm sure they will. More tape stuck to the finger. Now that tape is stuck to that finger. I got some blue tape on the thumbnail. It's going great. Let's put it together. This will be the first test to see if everything lines up. And because this was filmed after assembly, during assembly, I know that it's going to fit. It's pretty incredible how rigid that thing became once I seated those boards, those spokes, and added the glue to it. Really was incredible. Came out pretty cool. The rug was giving me grief because the spokes wouldn't stay flat on one side and then flat on the other. So I decided I'd get a little bit of plywood and we'll put under there to make it so they'll stay where they belong. I don't know how many times you can hit the same boards before you realize you got to do something a little different. That's not working. Here comes the board. Push the wheel flat. Pull the spokes flat onto the board as well. Seat them. Everything looks good. Let's see if the dowel fits through them both, which we know it will, but I was using that dowel to help maintain alignment with the spokes. That way it wouldn't be twisted when we put the glue on it and we put it together. But it's working. Now, just to show you how we're doing this, how we're going to make it spin, a piece of 1-inch PVC fits great over top of a 1-inch dowel, creates a perfect bearing to spin a wheel on. Let's add some yellow goop and some CA glue. Grabbed myself a little scrap piece of wood to work the glue down into the slots with. Went and got the brush to do the spokes on the ends, and we're going to put it together. Now I'm using 2P10 medium thickness CA glue on this, and I'm allowing the CA glue to run into the spokes, as you can see here, and I'm hitting it with the activator, and I went around inside and outside all the way around to make sure everything stayed true and straight. Little glue cleanup, because this is a work of art. I continued to go around with the CA glue until I had filled up all those little fillets on the dog bones. Just kept adding more glue and more activator until it was completely full and stopped running through. Man, would you get a load of that walnut inlay? That is gorgeous. Too bad you're never going to see it once the frame goes out the outside. Okay, what I wanted to show you there was my handy dandy notebook holder on the end of my new rack shelf, and it's also a four-wheel drive glasses holder. Awesome. Just did a recent video on these guys. These are infeed tables for my plywood sheet that I'm going to start making the frame with. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link to that in the description below, because everybody should have those in their shop. Now here I'm using the biggest clamp in the world to hold my 1, 2, 3 blocks so that I can cut off the frame components. It's always a good idea to use a miter fence when you're doing short pieces like that off of a long piece. We're going to nail these two together so that I know that I have symmetry, so they're exactly the same when I cut them out. Finding center, finding edges, creating the angles that I want. This is all just by eye, roughly off of the sketch that I did from the paper there when I pulled it out of the pocket. Finding the center line so we can put the center hole in for the axle. Just like that, we have a center hole. PVC fits in there just right. What I'm doing here is creating, for lack of a better term, keepers for the PVC so that the PVC won't slide out of the pieces of the frame once we put the axle in. And we have 4 of those. PVC won't go through there, but the dowel will. The dowel will obviously go through the frame and the keeper. Testing here just to ensure that everything is going to work the way I anticipate, and it does. Whee! I can't stop messing with this thing through the whole build. It took a lot longer because of it. Using a 1, 2, 3 block to start the spacing. That fancy tool there can be found on the Googler at the Jungle Store. Going to knock some holes in this thing. Now I didn't put any glue on the frame so that I can assemble and disassemble this as needed if I ever have to take that wheel out of the center of the frame. We flipped the board over and countersunk the hole so that it doesn't dig into anything. Again, big clamps, 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold everything square. If you don't have a set of those, they are extremely handy. I highly recommend you get a set of those, both those little clamps and those 1, 2, 3 blocks. So here you can see putting in the bushing, and that's how the keeper works to keep the bushing in place. Eventually I'll be cutting off the dowel, obviously, to the correct length, but again, whee, it works. Lining up the keeper so it's centered. A couple of nails. We did throw some CA glue on the back side of it. We're throwing some CA glue on the bushing to hold it in place. And we'll fill the void on the inside and some activator to make sure that bushing does not move. Of course, once the wheel's in, it can't come out anyway. Here we're lining up for the brackets for the drill, the braces, and as you can see, I put the line on the wrong side of the mark. Again, using 1, 2, 3 blocks to space things out evenly when I drill the holes. Those little clamps are the handiest things I've found in the shop lately. They're incredible for stuff like this. Just enough squeeze power to hold things in place while you're putting in screws. And here we're going to slow down the camera because I really wanted to show you how I did this. It was a pretty interesting technique. I found the depth of the socket first so that I knew how deep I had to make the recess on the dowel. And we're going to cut the dowel so that it matches the socket shape on the inside, the flats on the inside of the socket. Painter's tape on the top, pushing it down hard to create a rubbed line so I can see it. Then we're going to get out an X-Acto knife and we're going to trim around the inside of the socket, which then will become a template, as you'll see here in just a moment. Being very careful to cut on the flats and make the points. There's my template. Now we'll stick that dead center of the dowel. We'll take the dowel over to a flat surface so I can draw lines on the points. That's how you draw a straight line on a dowel, is with an edge groove like that. Then I'm using the calipers to give me a rough depth of what we measured to begin with. Taking the saw and cutting the flat in just to the depth of the flat. We're not going in very, very far till the 2 points intersect, or the 2 lines intersect, the cross line and the linear lines. And then we stop. Then it's a matter of taking a chisel and going straight down along the tape. And just like that, you have a lug nut. No, you have something that a socket will fit on to become a drive. Adding a little yellow goop here, and again, this is why we didn't glue anything together, because I needed to be able to move things for assembly and disassembly. Of course, once that slides onto that dowel, that will not be coming off again. Using a pencil and the paper towel to clean the glue off from the inside so it doesn't glue itself to the framework, which there's roughly 1/8 of an inch between the frame and the inside of the wheels, or the outside of the wheel. We'll glue this all back together, or screw this all back together again. And this is going to be the shaft keeper on the offside from the drill. Just taking the corners off so they're not so sharp. I drew a crosshair on that piece that matches the center line of the upright. A little CA glue in the corners. Activator lining up the marks, holding it still for 10 seconds. We're using 2P10 here. 2 parts, 10 seconds. There's all different brands of CA glue, but I highly recommend you get some of that if you don't have it. Now I remade the mounting brackets here, or the braces for the drill. I made them longer because I found that the impact was too short, or not too short. The impact would not turn the carriage without going into ratchet mode or hammer drill mode. So I switched to a traditional drill, made those longer, and as you can see, it fits. And just like that, we have a Ferris wheel for mice. And I rounded those corners so your hands didn't get bit when you put your hands on the drill. And here's the first test to see that it actually does work. I was like a kid in a candy store with this thing. I was so excited. It's just so simple to wind up a lead cord. And then again, take the drill off to unwind it, and you're in business. Now we have to do some quality control here with the boss. And as you'll see, she's very pleased because she's the reason for the lead cord roller, her and her electric weed eater. Now she doesn't have any trouble rolling that up. Okay, so one of the challenging parts of this is creating the spokes evenly spaced inside the wheel. Now I know that I want the wheel 12 inches in diameter, so let's go to a new model and let's create a model that's 14 by 14 to give us a little extra space to work with. So we'll change these to 14 by 14. We're going to work in inches, and we're going to click OK. And that opens up the 3D view. And to do this, it's pretty easy, really. Go over to the circle tool, click on that, grab in the center somewhere, and pull out, holding down the left mouse key. We're looking for a 12-inch wheel, so we'll change that to 12 inches. Clicking Create, otherwise that wheel will disappear. We're going to hit F9 to make sure that it's in the center of the project, which it is. Now we need to create another wheel within that first wheel at the distance or the diameter of the spokes. Now I'm looking for roughly a 6-inch spoke set inside of this wheel. So trust me on this, I'm going to go 5 inches. I know that seems strange. If you want 6 inches, why are you going 5? But I'll show you here as we go along. So we're going to create another circle at 5 inches. I'm going to create that one. We're going to close out the circle tool. Going to click on both of these and hit F9 just to ensure that they are definitely in the middle and that they're where I need them to be. Now, so here's the outer circle of the wheel. Here's the inner circle of the wheel where the spokes are going to be. We need to create a shape that is the shape of what the spokes are going to be. Now, the spokes are going to be a rectangle, obviously, so we go to the square tool, and we're going to put that inside the smaller circle. We're going to create the dimensions on that. In my case, I went with a width of 0.25 or a quarter of an inch, and I went 1 inch high. I didn't round the corners on it yet. We don't want 1.1, we want 1 inch high. And we click Create. And there we have a sample of the spoke. And we need to do that so that we can spread this spoke all the way around this inner circle evenly. But before we do that, we want to close out the square tool. We want to go over here to the fillet tool. Looks like an arrow or a pointer. Click on that. We're going to go onto this side, and we're going to choose dog bone. And I'm going to use an 1/8 inch end mill to do these spoke holes. So I want a radius of 1/2 of that, which is 0.0625. That's correct. We're going to go back over here, and let's click off of that square. We'll start over here. We'll click that one more time. These settings are correct. Click off that square, and let's zoom in. Now, if you hover over the corner, you can see that the cursor changes to that square with the lines on the outside. That indicates that you're on the corner. Left click, and as you can see, it adds the fillet for you. We're going to do that on each corner. Very simple. Come on now. There it goes. We're going to close this back out. We don't need the fillet menu any longer. And now you're going to ask, okay, now how do we set these on this circle evenly? It's very simple. Click on the square, push Shift, click on the circle, go up here, and click on Paste Along a Curve. Click that. That gives you this drop-down menu. We're going to specify a number. I want 6 spokes, so you're going to put 6 here. And coincidentally, I know that people have asked before how you lay out a clock. I'm going to be doing a tutorial on that, and it's very similar to this. You'll choose a specific number, say 12, because there's 12 hours, and it will plot them all the way around the circle. We're going to align the copies to the curve. We're going to click Paste, and as you can see, it's dropped them evenly spaced all the way around that circle. Go back to the cursor tool, click off of that circle. We can now click on this square and delete him. We don't need him any longer. We can click on this circle and delete it. We don't need that any longer. And when we back out, we now have a wheel with spokes. If we click on one of them, they're grouped. Let's hit F9 to ensure that it's in the center because you don't want a cattywampus wheel. And now we simply have to do tool paths to create this out in the shop. And I'll do that now. It's very simple. We're going to go to Tool Paths. We're going to go to Area Clearance. You know what? Let me back up one step here. Let's go to the circle tool once more because you're going to want to put a sprocket through the center of this or a dowel. Click the circle tool once more. And I know that the dowel I have is 1 inch in diameter. I've already measured it, so we'll go with 1 inch. Let me back that out. Oh, I've made two. No worries. We'll create it, cancel the circle tool, click on the outside one, and we'll simply delete it. Don't ever think that when you do things incorrectly that you have to panic and back out and start all over. You don't have to do that. Just delete your mistakes. So now we have a center sprocket hole. We have the spokes going around the wheel. Let's do the tool pass. Click on those spokes, and because they're both going to be area clearance, push shift, click on that center spoke hole or center sprocket hole, I'm sorry, and we're going to group them. Now we'll go over to the tool pass, go to area clearance, selected vectors, cut depth, start depth 0, finish depth will be the thickness of your material. Now in my case I used 3/4 inch plywood, so it'll be 0.75. We're going to add a tool. As I said, we're using an 1/8 inch end mill. We'll select that. As we drop down, we're going to change it to offset from raster. Safe Z height is 0.1, that's correct. We need to set up the material, it'll be 0.75. Click OK. Calculate now. You can name it if you'd like, it's not necessary. Calculate it now. And as you can see, it's cut out the spokes and the center shaft hole. We'll call that a shaft hole. We're done there. Now if we click on the outer ring, we're going to do a profiling tool path to the outside. We're going to go start depth 0, finish depth 0.75. We're going to click on 1/8 inch end mill again because I don't want to change the tool to do this. Select it. Scrolling down. For the sake of argument, I'm going to put in bridges. You could do the blue tape and CA glue trick to hold everything in place. I can do the bridges and sand those off with my belt sander rather easily, so we'll do that. We're going to put in a constant number of 3. The length will be 1/2 inch. We'll go with a thickness of 1/4 inch. We'll add the bridges. They're there. Let's calculate now. Close this out. And as you can see, we have tool paths to cut the wheel out. If we go to tool paths on the right, right click on tool paths, we can drop down and simulate all tool paths. Let's simulate. And there is one of the 2 sides to our spool. You'll carve out 2 of these, and then we'll continue out in the shop that is the shop, and we'll show you how to assemble it and cut out the frame and do all of the other things that I needed to do to stop looking like a gorilla. Obviously, you'll save these tool paths the traditional way and send them to your machine the traditional way. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it. Again, no more wrestling with a lead cord out in the yard. Please give us a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. As always, I'll catch you on the next one.